You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Feel like who art Ed?
Try to slice it.
Who art is Mr. Wood art Ed me?
Good. Either way, it's ambiguous. It works on so many levels.
I know.
That's off to a great start.
Welcome to Who Arted Weekly Art History for all ages. I'm your host, Kyle Wood, and today we're going to be looking at Albrecht Dürer. Now, before we get started, I do want to remind everybody, voting is open for round 3 in our annual Arts Madness tournament. It's been really cool to see what artworks you all like, and there have been some amazingly close matches, including last week, Herb Williams eked out the smallest of victories up against Wolfgang Beltracchi. It came down to a single vote as votes were coming in Saturday up until right around the time the forum closed at noon. Now, if you want to weigh in on this week's matches, please go to whoartedpodcast.com/vote or check the links in the show notes and let me know which artists and artworks you think are better this week and every week until we get down to just one Ultimate Arts Madness champion. Now on to Albrecht Dürer. Albrecht Dürer was born May 21st, 1471 in the city of Nuremberg, a center of trade in the Holy Roman Empire. His father, also named Albrecht, was a successful goldsmith who had emigrated from Hungary. His mother, Barbara Holper, was the daughter of a Nuremberg patrician. Young Albrecht was the third of 18 children. Yes, 18 children, but sadly many of them did not survive into adulthood. His early education was likely at a local Latin school where he would have learned reading, writing, and arithmetic, but his father intended him to follow in his footsteps and become a goldsmith. So at the age of 13, Dürer began an apprenticeship in his father's workshop. It was here that he learned the meticulous skills of drawing, engraving, and metalwork, skills that would later prove invaluable in his printmaking. He created a remarkable self-portrait from this period when he was just 13, and his talent was evident. Dürer would later recall his father's response, where he said, quote, "My father had particular pleasure in me because he saw I was diligent in learning to work," end quote. Now, while his father may have wanted him to be a goldsmith, Dürer's artistic inclinations leaned more towards painting. In 1486, at the age of 15, he persuaded his father to allow him to switch apprenticeships. And he was placed in the workshop of Michael Wohlgemuth, Nuremberg's leading painter at the time. Now, Wohlgemuth was a prolific artist who produced altarpieces, portraits, and woodcut illustrations. In that studio, Dürer learned the fundamentals of painting, including the preparation of panels, mixing of pigments, and the application of paint. He also gained experience in woodcut design, as Wohlgemuth's workshop was responsible for the woodcut illustrations in the Nuremberg Chronicle, a massive illustrated history of the world. And this experience exposed him to the potential of printmaking, which obviously he would later become well known for. Following the traditional practice of young artisans, Dürer embarked on his Wanderjahr. Apologies on pronunciation. It was his journeyman years in 1490. This period of travel, typically lasted for a few years, allowed young journeymen to gain experience in different workshops and expand their knowledge and skills. Dürer's exact itinerary is not fully known, but he likely traveled to several cities, including Colmar, Basel, and Strasbourg. In Colmar, he hoped to meet a renowned engraver, but Schongauer, the engraver, had died shortly before Dürer's arrival, so he met with his brothers, who welcomed him in and allowed him to study some of the work. So he looked at these engravings and was taken by the delicate lines and the masterful use of light and shadow. In 1494, Dürer returned to Nuremberg and he married Agnes Frey, the daughter of a prominent coppersmith. This marriage was likely arranged, as was common at the time, and it provided Dürer with social connections and financial stability. Shortly after this marriage, he made his first journey to Italy, which was pivotal in helping to shape his artistic vision. I mean, this was the Renaissance era. He was seeing works from greats like Leonardo da Vinci, but there may have been other reasons for the trip as well. It's not entirely clear, but it is believed that an outbreak of the plague in Nuremberg might have prompted his departure. Now, after he returned to Nuremberg in 1495, Dürer established his own workshop and began to focus increasingly on printmaking. He saw the potential of the medium to reach a wider audience than painting, and he dedicated himself to elevating printmaking to a fine art. He mastered both woodcut and engraving, developing innovative techniques that pushed the boundaries of these media. His Apocalypse series of woodcuts, published in 1498, was a groundbreaking achievement. It was based on the Book of Revelation from the Bible and showcased his mastery of composition and his ability to convey emotion and movement. He was also just incredible with just tiny details, the textures and the lines. He continued to produce just masterful prints throughout his career and gained quite a reputation all throughout Europe. He would later have to travel to Italy basically just to protect his copyright. He found that Italian artists were copying his prints, and so he sought some legal recourse to prevent the unauthorized reproductions, but it looks like he was not entirely successful in that. But again, with another trip to Italy, he did gain some more insights into the Italian style, the Renaissance greats, and looking at classical works from antiquity as well. After he returned from Italy in 1507, he continues to produce paintings, prints, but also theoretical writings. As a great Renaissance man, he was a prolific writer in addition to a visual artist. He published several treatises on art theory, including 4 books on measurement and 4 books on human proportion. He was deeply interested in the theoretical foundations of art and sort of trying to understand principles of beauty and harmony. He believed that art should be based on mathematical principles and careful observation of nature. As he wrote, quote, "For truly art is embedded in nature. He who can extract it has it." Now, for the rest of his life, he continues to produce works. But in 1520, he traveled to the Netherlands, hoping to secure a pension from the new emperor, Charles V. And he was successful in that because, he was a greatly celebrated artist. And he continued to meet with other artists and kept detailed journals of his travels, recording observations and experiences, up until he died April 6th, 1528, at just the age of 56. Although he was relatively young by today's standards, he left behind a vast body of work that continues to inspire and influence artists to this day. He elevated printmaking to a fine art, and his paintings, drawings, and etchings are renowned for their technical brilliance, the realism, and their emotional depth. Now, after a short break, we're going to take a closer look at one of his pieces, Adam and Eve. Albrecht Dürer's Adam and Eve is a meticulously crafted engraving from 1504. The image depicts the biblical first couple on the cusp of the fall. In it, we can see not only Dürer's mastery of the medium, but his understanding of human anatomy and his ability to imbue a seemingly simple narrative with layers of complex symbolism. It's more than just a depiction of the biblical story. It's a reflection of Renaissance ideals. He created it in a pivotal moment in his career. He'd already established himself as a leading printmaker in Europe, particularly with his groundbreaking Apocalypse series of woodcuts. But as we all know, it's hard to follow a successful series. With this, Dürer was showing he's not just a one-hit wonder. He had a whole lot more left to say, to do, and to create. Now, to start, let's just look at how he created it. The process of engraving involves incising lines into a metal plate, typically copper, using a sharp tool called a burin. Ink is then applied to the plate, and the substance is wiped clean, leaving ink only in the incised lines. Finally, a sheet of damp paper is pressed to the plate under high pressure, transferring the image. In Adam and Eve, we can see just tremendous detail to like individual strands of hair and delicate textures, the foliage, the animal fur, every element just rendered with the utmost precision and clarity. I mean, it had to have been a painstaking process with not just patience and a steady hand. I imagine he created numerous preparatory drawings, studying the human form from live models, but also referencing classical sculptures. Adam's pose is believed to be inspired by Apollo Belvedere, a classic Roman sculpture discovered in the late 15th century and widely admired for its idealized representation of the male form. Eve's pose also echoes classical prototypes, but it's less directly derived from a specific model. Both figures are depicted in idealized proportions, with their bodies representing harmonious balance, a visually satisfying physical perfection. This emphasis on ideal beauty reflects the Renaissance humanist interest in the human form as a reflection of divine creation. But it doesn't stop there. He also imbues them with a bit of naturalism and a sense of inner life. This was a typical characteristic of the Northern Renaissance. Adam's gaze is intense and focused, while Eve's expression is more subtle and enigmatic. While their proportions are idealized, they have this softness and vulnerability that sets them apart from the more rigid and monumental figures of classical sculpture. This was intentional. Dürer would write that the perfect human form, while ideal, must be understood as diverse. Now, as we look beyond the figures, the setting is also filled with symbolic details. The animals surrounding the couple, for instance, are not just decorations, but they represent the four humors, the bodily fluids that, according to ancient and medieval medicine, determined a person's temperament and health. The elk represents melancholy, the rabbit represents sanguine, the cat symbolizes choleric, anger, the ox represents phlegmatic. The presence of these animals suggests that even before the fall, the seeds of human imperfection were already present. The parrot perched above Eve has been interpreted in different ways. Some scholars see it as symbolic of the Virgin Mary, whose obedience to God contrasts with Eve's disobedience. Others suggest that the parrot, known for its ability to mimic human speech, represents false wisdom or deception, foreshadowing the serpent's role in the fall. The mountain goat standing precariously on a distant cliff is often seen as a symbol of damnation and the scapegoat, while the mouse near Eve's feet may represent the insidious nature of evil. Even the trees in the background carry symbolic weight. The fig tree, from which Adam has taken a branch to cover himself, is traditionally associated with the fall. And the tree behind Eve, on which the serpent is coiled, could be seen as representing the tree of knowledge. There's even a little personal touch where Dürer added himself to the work. We see he signed a placard hanging from the branch where the parrot sits. It reads, "Albrecht Dürer of Nuremberg made this, 1504. Adam and Eve was an immediate success, further enhancing Dürer's reputation as a master printmaker. The engraving was widely circulated and copied, influencing artists across Europe. It's more than just a technical masterpiece. It explores themes of beauty, temptation, sin, and loss of innocence. In this work, Dürer showed that he was not only skilled with the tools to create lines, textures, shapes, and proportions of human anatomy, he had a mastery of composition and symbolism, allowing him to create an image that would resonate with viewers for over 500 years, and will likely continue to do so for centuries to come.
This concludes this week's episode of Who Arted, part of the Airwave Media Podcast Network. If you found this tolerable, please leave a rating or review on your favorite podcast app. You can find images of the work being discussed this week and every week on social media at Who Arted Podcast on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, and of course on the website whoartedpodcast.com. Podcast done.